Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Rush Hour with me, Sumita Karir. Our top story tonight, well, former US President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle Obama have delivered a power-packed speech at the Democratic National Convention, or DNC. They urged Americans to back Kamala Harris in her 11th hour presidential bid against Republican former President Donald Trump. In fact, Barack Obama said, and I quote, "We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before." He also said, and I quote, "America is ready for a new chapter." In fact, his wife and former First Lady Michelle Obama also said, and I quote, "America, hope is making a comeback." And of course, she was alluding to Kamala Harris. This was, of course, a thumping endorsement for Democratic nominee Ms. Harris. So the big question is, have these endorsements really tilted scales even further in favor of Kamala Harris? And what does it really do to the Democratic Party's campaign, especially in swing states? In fact, to discuss that and more, I'm now joined by Ray Locker, the national security editor of USA Today. Thank you very much, Mr. Locker, for joining us here on ET Now. I want to first understand from you, when the Obamas say that the torch has been passed and hope is making a comeback, this was indeed a rousing speech, but how much of a boost will this give to Kamala Harris's campaign? She was already leading in key states in, several polls, but has that gap been narrowed even further?
Well, it's not necessarily the speech or the speeches, which were uniformly good and rousing for the people inside the convention hall and the people who watch them at home. It's that it's a sign of increased enthusiasm among the Democratic base and Democratic campaigns nationally. And that enthusiasm was lacking before President Biden withdrew from the race. Now people are feeling encouraged as they go about taking on Donald Trump for the third time this November. And I think that's going to translate into more people going out there, giving money, working for the campaigns, making sure their friends and neighbors vote.
Right, Mr. Locker, but where do you see the campaign now? Of course, you're hinting at a renewed sense of enthusiasm that is coming for the Harris's campaign. In fact, Obama did concur that it is still a tight race between both the candidates. But what has it really done symbolically for Ms. Harris? Because she was also seen lagging on the economy front. She was, of course, attacked by Donald Trump for not being very forthright about her views on fixing the economy and, of course, on certain other policy issues.
Well, I mean, it doesn't do anything about the fundamentals of the economy, which, by the way, are pretty strong compared to other developed nations. I mean, we have the lowest inflation rate of the developed world, particularly in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Unemployment is lower than when Trump left office. So a lot of things are going right in this economy. And if you look at the crawl on the bottom of your screen, you see the Dow is almost at 41,000, which is where it never was when Trump was president. So I think things are going better. I think people feel better about things. A lot of Democrats just didn't like the idea of going into the November election with an 81-year-old president who was really starting to show his age. Now you have a better contrast with 59-year-old Harris versus Trump, who's 78 and kind of stumbling around and slurring his speeches. So all that combines for a more enthusiastic Democratic base, which is what you need when you have a tight race. And it's going to be tight. The days of seeing, a 19-point blowout like we saw in 1984 with Ronald Reagan against Walter Mondale are over. These things are decided by, 2-3 percentage points nationally, and even closer in some of the swing states. So enthusiasm is critical.
Right, enthusiasm is critical, but Mr. Locker, where does this leave Mr. Trump? If you could expand a bit more on that, especially in swing states, and what can his campaign do to beat the charge of a repeated script playing out?
Oh, I mean, first of all, let's remember Donald Trump has never received a majority of the popular vote in this country. He won in 2016 because he managed to knock off some of these key swing states, which are still really important. So they're important this year. They were important before. They will be in the future. What you've seen now is Harris has managed to add another state into this swing state category, which is North Carolina. Nobody really thought in 2016 or 2020 that was gettable for Democrats. It is now. She's leading or tied in a lot of those polls. We're going to see both candidates basically in these swing states all the time. If you're a voter in Utah or California, you are not going to see a visit from a presidential candidate this year. It's just not going to happen. Both candidates are going to live in those states. And that's where all of their advertising and ground game focus will be, because it's really that important. And, if one campaign gets a sense that they're weakening in those places, they'll redouble their efforts.
Right. And Mr. Locker, let me also ask you about this very important point, this very pertinent point that you brought up as far as, Biden's age was concerned. And of course, there wasn't that much of enthusiasm as far as the Democratic Party is concerned. But Ms. Harris coming into the fray has really re-energized, the core base. So the question is it Biden 2.0 at play here with respect to Donald Trump and, of course, his age? Because there have been attacks and there have been allegations that he's speaking incoherently and bumbling and blabbering.
Well, they're not just allegations. I mean, watch the recordings, watch his speeches. I mean, a lot of what he said just doesn't make sense. Sentence fragments, drifting off into various tangents, continuing to talk about a movie character, Hannibal Lecter. I mean, what presidential candidate does that? I mean, before 2016, you never saw a candidate do any of that stuff. Now he does it all the time, and it's nonsensical. I mean, Mitt Romney in 2012, a dignified man making, very dignified statements, credible statements. And if you had a criticism of Romney, you could talk about it in terms of his political views, whether you agreed with him or not. With Trump, you don't know really what he's saying half the time. And he contradicts himself constantly. I mean, recently he was saying you have to, you're at risk of when you go out to buy bread, of getting shot. I mean, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anywhere. And so it's not just an allegation, it's fact. And you just watch it for yourself and you decide.
Right. And, Mr. Locker, why is Trump's pitch on, stopping these wars? Because he's attacked, the Biden administration, that if he were in power, these wars would have never happened and they would have never escalated to this level. He's also spoken about fixing the economy, inflation, fighting immigration and reducing taxes. Why are those claims really not working? Is it the concern of his age that is taking over rest of, the policy planks that he's made and the speeches that he's made?
I don't really think so. I mean, his age is a factor, but it's more Donald Trump himself. He is not a universally popular figure. I mean, if he was universally popular, more people would support him. Like I said before, never received the majority of the popular vote. Has lost the popular vote in both of his previous election campaigns. He never polled above 50% approval during his presidency. He's just not a likable person. He doesn't even like the people who vote for him. So it's in many cases a reaction against the candidate himself, which is true in very, very many elections. Not a lot of voters go, let me look at his specific policy ideas. That's helpful. But no, it's, do I like this person? Do I want to hang out with them? Does this person make me feel comfortable or uplifted? And Trump doesn't do that for a lot of people. His campaign is really one of grievance. And if people are nursing the same kind of grievances that he is, then they like him. But if they aren't, then they look at him and say, I don't know if that guy's for me.
All right. Thank you very much on that note, Mr. Locker, for sharing your thoughts on the current presidential campaign. Of course, it is a tight race, like Barack Obama pointed out, and we'll have to see what the Republican campaign really does for Donald Trump, who seems to be perhaps lagging behind as far as popularity and, of course, polls are concerned. You also rightly mentioned about the kind of funding that the Harris campaign is getting. Once again, thank you very much for taking the time.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.